Without further ado, I'll begin by introducing Mr. George Gachara. Please put your hands together as he comes to the stage. I'll just say a few words about George. He's a renowned creative industry strategist and fund advisor. Right here, George. Thanks. So George is a renowned creative industry strategist and fund advisor, an investor in Africa's creative industries. He has over a decade of experience in initiating and managing catalytic funds and financial facilities. He has established himself as a leader in accelerating the growth of creative industries on the continent. Some of his notable initiatives include the Pioneer Creative Industries Fund, HIVA Fund, and the Netflix Creative Equity Scholarship Program. George, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
Join us.
Thank you.
We also have the pleasure of joining us for this conversation, Mr. Belakem Hadjad. Please put your hands together for him. Mr. Hadjad, are you here? I know he's backstage, so he should be here in a second. I'll just say a few words as he steps forward. He's a renowned Algerian filmmaker, actor, and producer, and director. He has a career that spans well over 4 decades, and he has made significant contributions to Algeria's cinema producing and directing, award-winning films, telefilms, and documentaries. It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
Hello.
Merci.
Welcome.
Bienvenue. We also have Amadou Sek. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as he steps forward. He's a Vice President of Scripted Programming at Macro Television Studios. Amadou is a visionary executive producer and dedicated to amplifying diverse voices and perspectives. Please put your hands together for him. Thank you very much. Notable credits include the upcoming Apple TV series, Government Cheese, and critically acclaimed Cobra Kai. It's a pleasure to have you, Amadou. We also have joining us Mukhtar Mohammed. A round of applause for Mukhtar. He is an executive producer dedicated to bringing premium Black content and talent to a global audience. He's a partner in It's a Rap production company founded by a rap man that brings Black stories to the world. Most recently, Mukhtar was the executive producer on Supercell. That's the Netflix smash hit, which charted as the #1 most watched TV show globally. Mukhtar, it's a pleasure to have you. And last but certainly not least, we have Boris Kojo. Please put your hands together for Boris. Needs little introduction if you've been tracking Hollywood. He's a multifaceted actor, director, producer, investor, and philanthropist. Star of the ABC hit series Station 19 and renowned for roles in House of Cards, Brown Sugar, and Resident Evil. Boris, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get right into it. My panelists are very capable to unpack this topic. We're talking about financing, bringing more money into this space, film and TV. I'll start with you, George. And if you can just give us your perspective, because you run a fund, and tell us about your thoughts about how to access financing for film on the African continent. Yesterday, I was taking a look at the Canex shorts. Really, really amazing productions. I think these stories need to be told, even if it's just for the educational and informative value of those stories. But I think many will be entertained as well. But then we have so many creatives that struggle to get access to financing. You obviously has been bringing a lot of financing to projects. Tell us more about the new ways to get this done.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting us here in a beautiful city of Algiers. It's my first time here, but I've also taken some time to watch local films and to speak to creators in this ecosystem. I think it's a critical time in our continent that films are not just recreational. They can be both commercial projects and also deeply artistic projects.
Sure.
We've seen in the last decade an increase in the quality interest both domestically in the continent and in the diaspora. In my experience, we have financed over 100 film projects from different perspectives. We've financed studios to acquire rights, especially for popular TV dramas like The Housewives of, and also to create merchandise and to create properties related to that intellectual property. We've also financed studios to acquire assets that they can continue to use in different productions. We've financed studios and producers to meet the gap between the finances they have from commissions as they wait to produce and recoup their money from distributors. So there are numerous models that are available for financing different types of film projects. But most important is that the filmmakers have to come from a place where they want to make their films commercial. And if you start from the commercial standpoint, then audience and distribution is a critical part of the puzzle.
Right.
And so once a filmmaker walks up to our office and they have thought about the production and the distribution and how to leverage both, then we are able to structure some sort of financing.
So what type of structures?
So I'll give you an example with a recent deal that we have just signed. I won't name the names or the off-takers, but a gentleman from South Africa walks up to us and tells us that they have these 3 scripts and they have done these 3 pilots. And they have these 3 possible off-takers, and some of them they've worked with before. And they want this amount of money. They are able to raise a little bit from themselves, a little equity from their friends, and a bit of pre-sales. So they have a gap. So then we have to discuss how they want that gap to be met. Some people want equity, some people want debt, some people want a mix of debt and equity. And so those are the kind of models and structures that we use to finance. But the most important part in a film deal, as far as I'm concerned, is the distribution part.
Right.
And so you have to have thought about your actors, your producers, vis-a-vis your market, and who will take the film to the last mile.
So on the point about distribution, clearly the platforms that are available in Africa are not as developed as we have in the Western world.
Sure.
So the big question is, when many of these project promoters would come to you, for example, for financing, to what extent is the deal size important to you doing that transaction? Because at the end of the day, I get the sense that until we do see these platforms really evolve on the continents, we are going to see projects that commercially will be a much smaller scale than what you will find in most of the West.
So I financed all levels of films. I financed the $1 million film. I financed the middle level film, which is $300,000 to $500,000. And I financed the 5,000.
5,000?
5,000. We have different levels of investment.
So there's room for everybody?
There's room for everybody. Yes. But what is important for us is that the math has to make sense. At the 5,000 level, and I love the 5,000 level film because that's where a lot of entry-level filmmakers are building their capacity, they're testing their audiences, and they're testing their capacity for last-mile distribution. I have seen a lot more innovation at the 5,000 level than at the $1 million level. I'll give you one example because of time.
Real quick.
In East Africa, there's a platform called Sahara. And this Sahara is a pay-per-view platform that the audience can pay $1, $2 to watch an episode or a full series. And most of the 5,000 level investments, 50,000 level investment, they make their money at opening night. And then they go on to produce in a guerrilla fashion new films, and eventually they become the 30,000. But the more sophisticated deals at the $1 million level, the proponents have to come with a plan. They have to tell us, we've spoken to Mnet, we've spoken to Canal Plus, we've spoken to XYZ, and we have had this kind of responses. And based on that, we can structure a fit-for-purpose deal.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Mr. Bellacom, thank you so much for joining us again for this. You've been a veteran filmmaker for many years, and I think one thing we found with filmmaking, especially consumption of film on the African continent, is that I think filmmakers from other parts of the world have sort of dominated the space. And I just wanted to hear your perspective as a local filmmaker in terms of how to maintain that authenticity, local authenticity of filmmaking, and still making it very valuable and desired by the African market. Can you just share your perspective from what you've experienced?
Écoutez, d'abord, merci pour les initiateurs de cette réunion. C'est très important parce qu'en réalité, pour répondre indirectement à votre question, c'est qu'en réalité, nous, on devrait avoir comme première réflexion que notre premier marché, c'est l'Afrique de manière générale. Pourquoi ? Mais parce qu'en fait, si on veut effectivement faire des films, comme vous dites, authentiques, des films qui prennent leurs racines dans ce que nous sommes, qui prennent leurs racines dans notre matrice culturelle, nous partageons la même matrice culturelle qui est l'oralité au niveau de l'Afrique de manière générale. Et donc, la réflexion que moi, réalisateur, mais je ne suis peut-être pas le seul, qu'on se fait, qu'on veut faire un film, c'est de se dire, j'aimerais bien partir de l'inspiration de cette matrice culturelle basée sur l'oralité pour en investir la manière avec laquelle je vais écrire mes films, la manière avec laquelle je vais réaliser mes films. Mais bien entendu, quand on fait ce genre de réflexion, immédiatement se pose la question, ouais, mais si je fais ce film-là, à qui je vais l'adresser ? C'est-à-dire que si je fais des tentatives de réflexion dans l'écriture filmique pour que je me rapproche au mieux de cette matrice culturelle qui est la tradition orale, je vais tenter des choses qui peuvent être expérimentales et donc qui ne sont peut-être pas complètement abouties dans un premier temps. Et donc il faudrait que je puisse m'adresser à un public qui puisse même intuitivement comprendre ma démarche, et pas seulement comprendre ma démarche, mais la comprendre dans le sens où, malgré les manques qu'il y aurait dans mon, entre guillemets, mon expérimentation, il comprendrait le propos. Et c'est là où, en réalité, quand je fais un film, moi, algérien, la tendance, malheureusement, c'est qu'en général, on pense au marché européen et on se dit « Ah, mais comment je vais faire un film pour que je puisse trouver un distributeur en Europe, etc. etc. » Et du coup, à partir de ce moment-là, je vais me préoccuper des codes de perception et de réception des gens qui sont en Europe, et souvent c'est au détriment des miens, et donc je dirais des nôtres africains. La logique voudrait que je fais un film et que je le propose d'abord à un marché africain, mais il faudrait que ce marché africain existe, et c'est là où, si le film est apprécié et tout, ça lui servira de rampe de lancement à l'international à ce moment-là.
Thank you very much for sharing that. If I can go to Amadou and just following from that point he just shared about how you appeal to the global market, what elements from your experience do you think are important to really infuse into African filmmaking so that it can go further? Can you just share your perspective on that from your experience?
Gotcha. Well, thank you for having me on the panel. Honored to be here. When it comes to African stories, there's a few elements to hit. I will say, just for context, at the company that I work at, Macro, that was started by Charles King, we focus on amplifying stories that center diverse characters, as well as created by diverse people in our industry. So a lot of independent studios or companies don't focus on that, but we hyper-focus on that, and we know that we are the global majority when it comes to diverse audiences. When it comes to storytelling, there's a few different things to focus on. One thing that I'll focus on, and I'll be remiss to say it, is one, understanding the marketplace. The film and TV industry, just like the stock market, just like the housing market, any other market has ups and downs. I will say right now, the entertainment industry is going through a contraction. Now the thing is that audiences are still consuming content, but the places, as far as the networks, the streamers, they are buying less, and the bar for the content has become higher. But we have now seen that places, for example, Netflix, half of their productions have been shot internationally for the first time in the company's history, so more people are looking for global stories. So one, understanding the marketplace, and there's trades as far as companies like Variety, Deadline, things of that nature that'll talk about the industry, understanding what the marketplace is looking for as the types of stories that appeal. I know right now, just as far as things that travel, things that are more so commercial, broad, as far as action appeal, thrillers, things of that nature, soapy dramas are really interesting right now that people are looking for. The next thing underneath that is to really focus on having an amazing script, an amazing pitch. I can't stress this enough, but the thing is the script is one of the most powerful things in our industry. A good story, well told, can get people to fall in love with it, but also that story comes to life. So when it comes to the craft of writing, really understanding story structure, how to have individuals fall in love with characters, sort of the beginning, middle, end climaxes, there's books on that, but I think the importance of working on scripts, reworking those, really making sure that they're tight, as far as pitches and compelling for production companies or individuals like me to see them is really important. And I will say lastly, just to put a button on it, strong characters are really important. Whether it's movies or TV shows, if you have a character that is compelling, that is going through some type of universal struggle or obstacle that they're trying to overcome, but you fall in love with, is really important. I think concepts get production companies and networks interested in it, but audiences, we fall in love with characters. Right. And characters are central to any story, but if you have a great and compelling leads for a show, for a film, this is something that will resonate not only domestically but globally. Right,
but I'm just curious on that point about characters. Would you say, and it's interesting the statistic you pointed out in terms of the appeal of content on Netflix being now skewed towards international content versus, say, American content. But would you say there is a greater appeal for fiction as opposed to non-fiction stories? I just want to hear your perspective on that. Because the reason I bring that up is because there are so many stories, especially with African stories that have not been told, that are real stories.
Yeah, no, it varies. And I'll say this to say that there are definitely compelling fictional stories that need to be told as well as nonfiction. The thing is that our current marketplace, a lot of times when you hear about stories based off of true events or real people, a lot of times they occur in the past, in their period. And the first thing that a lot of networks or just companies hear when you hear a period piece is the budget goes up, because you have to make everything look like that time and period. So there is a desire for more contemporary stories. Right. The thing is that if there are stories from certain countries demographics that just have to be told that everybody knows about. For example, we saw Mansa Musa, the musical last night. That's something that everybody knows about, and that's something that could be told, or is it Sunjata Keita? Things of that nature, there's ways of getting those stories out. But I will say, it's good to diversify the types of stories that you're telling. And I will say the marketplace right now is focusing more so on contemporary stories, whether that's fictional or non-fictional.
Thank you for that, Amaju. All right, let's go to Mukhtar. Mukhtar, let's talk about the importance of collaborating with the African diaspora to make these stories travel further. People like Amadu, for example, who is based in the United States, there's a sense that there's a huge opportunity for Africa to collaborate with the African diaspora. I want to hear your perspective on that point.
Well, thank you for having me. Very proud to be here. I think you got to look, for me, if you go back to your first question in regards to distribution, I think you got to look at kind of the connectivity of everything. Because I think sometimes we focus kind of a lot on global.
Right.
I think sometimes focusing on where you're from and telling stories of where you're from and trying to focus on your own market essentially brings a global audience later. Do you know what I mean? And I think sometimes if you can kind of really look at what story you're trying to tell, can I connect to my audience on ground here? Because I think sometimes a mistake we make, or not a mistake we make, focusing too much on how can I make this global stops you from trying to tell the story you might want to tell. Do you know what I mean?
Understood.
And I think one thing about the diaspora, and the focus on the diaspora as well, I think the diaspora, especially in the UK, I've spoke for the UK, there's a ceiling in the UK in terms of for black and African creators. There's a ceiling in the UK in terms of there's not enough of us there. Do you know what I mean? For us to get our stories out there. So I think there is a way of collaborating with the African content in terms of looking at, okay, how can we tell stories that, for example, if you want to bring, let's take Supercell, for example. Yeah, Supercell is a story that obviously about people with powers, etc., etc., etc. But the heart of it is a love story. Do you know what I mean? I think that love and stuff like that, love connects all the way. A good love story works, and we put that love story within a genre piece. And I think in that way we're able to connect with a global audience. But the main thing about Supercell, we're trying to tell our story for ourselves. We're trying to tell a South London story. And that South London story connects globally. Do you know what I mean? So I go back to your point on diaspora and stuff like that. I think the most important thing is telling stories that connect with your local audience. We can essentially go global later.
Got it.
And I think if you try to work in a sense of, oh, let me try and tell a global story, you lose sight of the story, because what is a global story? There's no such thing as a global story. A story is a story. And I think your story needs to work for you and work with your audience first, and the people trying to tell a story too, which is usually a local story. And then, as Amadou said, hitting the right story points on structure, storytelling, characters, strong characters that resonate, characters that you can be personal with. I think those things translate later. But the most important thing is the script as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Boris, I think great to have you here. Mukhtar has just pointed out a very important point, that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that African stories are African stories. So we shouldn't try and make them global, in quotes. But there will be a global appeal to them if they're told well. But from your experience in Hollywood, what would you say are some of the lessons learned in terms of how the US industry works that could be adapted to strengthen the African content production space?
To piggyback on what Mukhtar just talked about, I think what we're looking for is personal stories, right? It's not local, it's not global, it's personal. And once it's personal, there's going to be a lot of people who can relate and who can identify with the story because it's personal. So in terms of Africa, what that means is bring your own authenticity, your own personality to the story. And that will travel worldwide. That's what the South Koreans did, that's what the Indians are doing. When you're talking about topics and subject matters that are immensely personal to you, it resonates with everybody because we're all human beings. And in terms of the US industry, what we can learn from the US is numbers. And when we look at the numbers of African Americans versus, or the diaspora as a whole, which is the third biggest country in the world after China and India, and then we look at Africa as a whole and we look at the numbers, it's clear where the industry is going. So the only thing that's missing is the connectivity, which is coming at a speed that's 3 times faster than everywhere else in the world. When we're talking about digital connectivity, 5G, high-speed internet is where it's at, right? Because distribution is moving into a digital age where we're slowly moving away from theaters and we're going into streamers and we're going into mobile devices. We have 1.3 billion mobile devices on this continent.
Right.
And that's where the distribution will be. So what we learn is, especially from African American filmmakers in the US, is that our audience is the most loyal audience there is. We can target and identify our demographic better than any other demographic in the world. We know exactly where our audience is. We can be more cost efficient in how we produce content in the States. That's why black movies have never lost money in the history of Hollywood, right? So, because when we produce movies under $10 million and we identify specific targets down to the zip code, we can be very intentional in how we target those demographics. And we can have the same impact here in Africa, and how to be intentional, how to target our audiences, and how to be cost efficient. I mean, he was talking about $5,000 movies, $50,000, $500, and $1 million movies. It's actually great that we have the ability here to produce in a very cost efficient way. That doesn't mean we're gonna compromise on quality.
Right.
Because quality has a lot to do with technology, which is now an even playing field. So the challenge is to create our own narrative, because that narrative then impacts perception, which is the biggest challenge Africa has, right? So when we create those movies, it allows us to create our narrative, tell our stories, and counteract all those old stereotypes and one-dimensional thinking that we've been subjected to over the past 100 years.
Great point. Very well said. Thank you so much. Let me come back to George now. And he's hit on the point about distribution, which I think is really at the heart of success. He talked about numbers. So in your view, given the fragmentation of the African market, so to speak, technology gives a huge opportunity. So maybe you can speak to how we can bring that market together. What's the best way to build, if you like, stronger, more integrated distribution networks on this continent?
I think that's the challenge of our decade.
It is.
Because in every conference that I've been, it's clear that we can analyze the problem from the same place. But the next thing is, how do we proceed into the future? And the future is tomorrow. I have a couple of ideas that I've been trying to experiment with. Some of the ideas include supporting intermediaries in numerous ways. And the other category is pushing governments to do what they need to do. And finally, building local technologies for distribution. So I'll speak only about these two because the governments, they're probably seated here and they have long speeches.
And hopefully they will listen if they're not here. Go ahead.
We need something between Netflix and myself at the continent. So my grandmother is not sophisticated enough to have a bank account, to have a card, a Visa card, to get a Netflix account. And Netflix has made it impossible to share the login for 10 people or 5 households and so on and so forth. So there's a gap for distribution of both content, digital content, and short films and small and local films in local dialects, whether they are religious content, whether it's musical content, whether it's children's content, because all the subcultures of film have paying audiences. And I have invested in a couple of these platforms, and we've seen from Viusasa to Shahara, Viusasa in Kenya has more subscribers than Netflix, and it has more than 30,000 producers, and it has more than 120,000 subscribers, bigger than Netflix.
So what does the government have to enable to make that platform?
First, they need to get out of the way. They really have to get out of the way. But I don't want to talk about government. I also want to talk about this other group, which is the innovation. Film is an IP business.
Right.
And majority of the work has to go to the creation of the IP. And the IP is, you have to be crazy, you have to believe in a story, you have to try and find a way to tell that story in a way that's accessible to you without relying so much so in this American model that you have to be with a big studio, that you have to have spoken to HBO and so on and so forth. A small subsection of our producers will have that path, but a majority of us will produce, say, a drama series, right, and finance it through wedding photography and event photography and other kinds of audiovisual work, yes, within our local markets. So I think we need these middle distributors that are able to use local technologies to get the films and the film contents and the premieres and all this film culture at a local level.
Right.
Before we imagine that we will make sense only when we take the Hollywood model.
I think it's an interesting point you're making. So if we think local enough, we can hopefully find models that will work to
yes,
distribute this,
yes,
within that local environment.
But I still have resources for the sophisticated few.
So that would like take it to the next level.
At the top of the pyramid, and they have to be Olympic swimmers. They have to be synchronized swimmers. That they have to have the best cast, the best equipment, right, great directors to have a magic magic point for global distribution, and that's going to be the minority within our larger ecosystem.
Okay. I don't think we've got any specifics in terms of how that model will work.
Sure.
But I want to open this up to other panelists. Maybe Mr. Bellekem, you may have some thoughts on how we can potentially better distribute locally the content on the content.
Vous savez, en réalité, toute la problématique qui est posée est la suivante. Si on ne veut pas disparaître complètement en tant qu'Africain, créateur de contenu artistique, il faudra qu'on puise au fond de nous-mêmes. Et d'un, il faudra des financements. Et de deux, pour ces deux, l'implication du politique est importante. C'est-à-dire que pour qu'on puisse, par exemple, créer des marchés locaux. Allez, je prends nous, par exemple, les Algériens, on peut très bien, avec tout le Maghreb, du Maroc pratiquement jusqu'en Égypte, on a à peu près la même langue, du moins, même si ce n'est pas les mêmes, s'il y a des nuances, mais on peut se comprendre, et à terme, il est tout à fait possible à l'usage de créer une langue cinématographique qui sera comprise par tout le monde. On a à peu près des valeurs culturelles qui se rapprochent, donc là, potentiellement, il devrait y avoir un marché dans lequel, qui servirait à toutes les productions issues de ces pays-là. Je veux dire qu'au niveau, à l'échelle de toute l'Afrique, il est tout à fait possible. J'avoue que je ne connais pas très bien la problématique des langues en Afrique, mais évidemment, la première réflexion qui vient, c'est de dire, eh bien, il faudrait que les gens qui sont dans les pays anglophones trouvent une mécanique pour créer des marchés à eux, puisque ils sont africains, il y a une langue qui peut les réunir et se raconter des histoires et trouver un marché pour que ces histoires-là puissent continuer, qu'elles trouvent un public qui ramène de l'argent de manière directe ou indirecte à travers les médias et tout, et pour qu'on puisse créer une dynamique interne. Et pour cela, dans un premier temps, il me semble que les États, c'est important. Si je prends l'exemple à nous du Maghreb et de l'Algérie, il y a d'abord la problématique qu'on ne peut pas éviter. Je ne sais pas dans quel degré cela peut ressembler dans les niveaux africains, mais je veux dire, chez nous, par exemple, le problème de la culture de manière générale et tout, la place et le rôle de la culture dans nos sociétés sont un peu complexes, c'est-à-dire qu'ils sont ombilicalement liés au problème de la liberté d'expression à tout point de vue. Et donc, véritablement, nous, quand on veut faire du travail, de la création, on doit jongler entre les difficultés financières, entre ensuite les difficultés de censure, dites ou déguisées, qu'importe. Et donc, tout ceci n'est pas facile. Et ceci pourrait, pas être surmonté, mais pourrait devenir plus facile pour nous si on arrivait à trouver des collaborations et des solidarités transnationales pour les gens qui vivent à peu près les mêmes problèmes.
Love to jump in here real quick.
Sure, please.
I think some of the challenges we're talking about are based on the fact that we're producing in silos, right? There's always one filmmaker trying to get this money together to produce their film and then hoping for distribution and then waiting 3-4 years before they can afford to make the next movie. And that's a very arduous and very, very hard way to produce movies. And that's how these challenges keep showing up. I think we have to look at this. We have to look at this from a perspective of scaling. And if you're able to pool money together and generate capital to invest in 5, 10, 15, 20 movies, now you can protect the individual authenticity and integrity of the filmmaker while at the same time create leverage to go to the streamers and to negotiate from a place of power. Right? If I go to Netflix today with 10 movies, my deal looks different than if I go with one movie.
Right.
So as people of African descent, we have to learn how to partner. We have to learn how to create coalitions, to create synergies, to work together in order to create leverage. Unfortunately, because of history, the divide and conquer model has worked on us, whether it's colonization or slavery, and we're still subjected to to this negative legacy that's still with us. And for that reason, we think we have to be the crabs in a barrel. We have to fight for ourselves and hustle and grind. There's sitting somebody right next to me who has a network, who has capital, who has distribution. There's somebody else right here who has management, who has a representation model. We have to learn how to ask for help and how to pool our resources together and to work together. Because like you said earlier, 5,000, 50,000, or $1 million, that proposal is much more difficult if you look at it individually. But if we create a joint venture, we put a fund together, and we support filmmakers in various regions of Africa, and we pool those resources together, it's very expensive for one filmmaker to buy equipment. I get that.
Got it.
What if there's 20 filmmakers, and you're sharing the equipment, and you're paying for the equipment together? That's just a very simple example of how we can pool our resources together,
right,
and make it work.
I think if I was to summarize the point you're making there, at least one point that I'm taking away is that small may sound nice, but small is not strong. So we really have to aggregate resources if we're going to really make a huge difference and be stronger at the negotiation table.
And we will not compromise authenticity at
Right.
all. And now we have AI. I invested in a company that has the ability to take your voice, your language, and translate it in your voice in 30 different languages with a perfect sync of your mouth. So
Right.
you cannot tell that you don't know the language. So in terms of Africa and 2,000 different dialects and languages, that's a barrier that doesn't exist anymore. So we can actually, in production, we can be very intentional about making sure that, what he said earlier, create content that's authentic and that's personal to us, but it still will travel outside because there's no more barriers of language.
That's what technology is enabling now. Really running out of time before I come to the audience to take a few questions. But go ahead, Musa.
Jump in. I think one of the most important things, like I say, in distribution, I don't think we have the infrastructure in Africa in terms of the internet, 5G and stuff like that. I think it's trying to find the ways where there is investment in that.
Speak more into the mic so they can hear you.
The mic there, can you hear me now?
You go ahead.
Okay.
I think so.
I think it's trying to find ways that where there is more investment in the infrastructure, because I think the infrastructure will help distribution essentially. And I think, like for instance, here it's hard to kind of get internet in Algeria to communicate. Do you know what I mean? I think having that infrastructure and then finding ways, if it's government or whatever, banks or whatever, connecting with infrastructure people to create the internet service that's right. And then maybe, I don't know, telephone companies working with government in terms of film offices to try and say, okay, cool, how can we connect different parts of the
stream. Right. And there's a lot of different countries that are working on that. I am aware, just as far as the big companies in the States, whether that's Disney, Netflix, or Amazon, depending on where you are, you've already seen them come and probably participate in certain film festivals or deals or whatnot. It is said that I think within this decade, 90% of sub-Saharan Africa will have 3G or better. And I know that that is happening fast. And the companies know this, and they know that this is a demographic that is going to open up. So you are going to see more people from the West here. The big thing for seeing them come and probably participate in certain film festivals or deals or whatnot. It is said that I think within this decade, 90% of sub-Saharan Africa will have 3G or better. And I know that that is happening fast. And the companies know this, and they know that this is a demographic that is going to open up. So you are going to see more people from the West here. The big thing for individuals like myself, or just creatives in general, artists, they create art and they work. And the one thing that is imperative is for it not necessarily to be a takeover, but more of a partnership. And working with artists, especially across the diaspora, whether it's in the States or in the UK, things like this, are really helpful, whether it's collaborating on projects, figuring out how to work together, sharing that skill set is necessary. When I heard I was coming to Algeria, I said, oh my God, the Sahara Desert. The return on investment as far as being able to make it worthwhile financially for people to come to shoot these films in the different countries is something I've heard from a lot of producers as something that would definitely stem the tide, just as far as people coming and shooting it, whether it's Senegal to Kenya. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. And I'm hoping we can touch the point about film festivals in a moment. But I'd like to open this up now to the audience. So if we do have anyone that would like to ask a question or perhaps chime in and provide some commentary on some of the things we've pointed out. I see a hand over here. I also see a hand up front. So if we can just maybe start from the front. Please introduce yourself real quick and let us know who you're posing your question to, or if it's a comment, please make it very concise. Very concise.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esther Sami. I'm a filmmaker from Uganda. I would like to put it to any of the panelists. Can you comment on YouTube and the opportunities it presents for African filmmakers to be able to have their content are known and distributed all around the world? Because right now I know, or I've noticed, a number of Nigerian actors and producers having entire YouTube channels, and they keep churning out content for free, and I believe this helps build appetite or demand for African films. So could you comment on the opportunities that YouTube presents? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come to that. Do we have any other questions, so we can just come back to the panelists with their answers?
Yeah, hi. My name is Thabo Mulubi. I'm from South Africa. I think what I'd like to say is I think that politicians need to come more to the party. You know, the country that I come from, we have seen our history. Nations are built, institutions are built over time. The film industry and the entertainment industry is the most neglected of all, even in our country. We've got so many stories to tell. People tell stories all the time, but you can't build any infrastructure in any sector without the involvement of government. Government cannot be excused. They've got to come to the party. If you've seen, I had a chat with you yesterday about, you know, the history of Hollywood, how it came about. And I think it's important to learn those lessons from history, that Hollywood didn't fall from the sky. There was a concerted effort by government to control money and support arts and culture. You know, artists are treated as people that need to go and act somewhere under a tree whilst we're busy.
Right.
You know, that shouldn't be the case. And I can't thank Afrexim enough, you know, for coming to the party with this platform here. Let me give others a chance. Thanks.
Thank you. One last question, if we have it. No. Real quick, please.
Hello, my name is Choma Ude, and I'm from Nigeria. With regards to what Mr. Boris said about the global stories, there are no global stories, there are only personal stories. I might differ with that a bit with regards to global stories. There are stories of heist, there are stories of marital differences. There are certain stories that happen everywhere in the world. So when you make those kind of stories, people want to see how it's relatable in your country. How are those stories told in your country? So while it's also, while it's a global story, it has to be authentic from your side of the story. I'm just saying that there are global stories, actually.
Okay. We'll have him react to that. Unfortunately, we can't take more questions because of time. Let me throw this back to the panelists. Perhaps, Belekem, you want to speak to this issue about the role of politicians in terms of how they can potentially influence the growth of the film industry and TV industry in Africa. Because I do agree with the point about being very deliberate from a policy perspective. Influencing the narrative of your country, your continent, and so forth. I think that is the role typically of governments and politicians.
We said beforehand that the intervention or participation of politics with the governments is key. Let's take an example of the European cinema. If it exists, namely the French cinema, not only the French one, the other countries have followed the French cinema policy. They needed first the intervention of the French state or government. Without the participation, that's the support of a government, the American cinema would eliminate them completely. So I mean, the law of market is applied in everything, or they accept cultures, and that culture is not a merchandise. The role of the culture is a component of a personality, so we cannot make culture as merchandise. But if European countries, let's say that cinema was born in Europe, if we talk scientifically. So if they need protection, help, support of the government so that their cinema exists, what would we say? This is why the government participation on help is a key. Now, it's not that easy. This is why, in order to make government move and support, we need to have solidarity, and we should help each other. We used to have the African Organization of Cinema Professionals. We started to do so, but we were close. Unfortunately, we didn't carry on. This is why
the developed world knows Africa for an important role. But God, from the Christian point of view, from the potential of the culture, of art, of Africa, this can lead to Africa, and this is so extraordinary. Obviously, those who manage the cinematography, if I take just this as an example, do not give a damn about this, because their issue is to just get money. It is up to Africans to exploit at the maximum these huge fields of art, culture, and to invest cinema, and not only cinema.
Going global or personal story, I actually thought you were sort of in agreement, yeah, but I think the point about global stories was perhaps trying to... More questions concerning going global or personal stories. I actually thought you were sort of in agreement, yeah, but I think the point about global stories was perhaps trying to infuse different cultures into one by force.
That's what a personal story is.
Right.
It's personal. It's authentic to your voice. Right. And when it's personal, it resonates with everybody. So a personal story is a global story, if you will.
Got it.
Right. So I think we agree. And in terms of YouTube, I think that's just a known fact that it's a great platform that's accessible to anyone. And if you want to monetize it, there's different markets where you can be more efficient than others right now. But just as a whole, generally speaking, the entire content industry is slowly moving to Africa, and it's just because of the numbers, right? And so we can take advantage of all those opportunities that are here now, and Africa being at 1% streaming right now, as soon as it's up to a 60% streaming, the entire industry is going to shift towards Africa. So don't believe the hype. It is coming, and I think the only thing that investors have to know is that distribution has changed, and it will change continuously in the future until it's on all of our devices. Like he said, you need at least 3G in order to stream, and right now Africa is at 15%.
Right.
But again, as I said earlier, the growth of high-speed internet is 3 times faster in Africa than anywhere else in the world. So in the next 5 to 8 years, it will happen, and we will have a large part of Africa having access and therefore being able to stream.
I have been told I really have to round this up now because we have run out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, please can you put your hands together for our panelists for their very enlightening and informative commentary on the film and TV industry in Africa. Step forward. We're done? Okay, I hear we're done. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to connecting further. Okay, do we need step forward? Okay, can we just step forward?